It's amazing how many people believe we've moved beyond the cruelty of the drug war. The old panic was supposed to have given way to compassion, safe supply, supervised use, treatment and public health. But when you look more closely, the same systems that criminalised addiction are still managing it, pricing it and profiting from it. This video shows how Prohibition didn't really disappear. It just changed language, changed costume and carried on. So if the rhetoric is now compassion, why does control still look so familiar? This is part 38. So, I should say, drugs and addiction, an anarchist perspective, Dickie Dredd, and this is part 38. And I think it's the first part I've done outside, so finally looks like we've got spring on its way. Anyway, part 38, still on chapter 4, the war on drugs, and then the last part will be the next part will be the last part in that chapter, and move on to chapter 5. Yeah. So, section 38, global echoes and state complicity. Anarchism offers up wisdom. Under the banner of anti-narcotics operations, Western militaries destroyed smallholder livelihoods, then flooded domestic markets with cheap synthetics. When Taliban bans reduced poppy output in 2001, Western media declared a moral victory. Pharmaceutical corporations quietly expanded legal opiate production in Tasmania and the American Midwest. The commodity stayed constant, only its moral geography shifted. Cocaine funded counterinsurgency, heroin funded intelligence operations, and synthetic opioids funded pensions. The supply chain of suffering remained intact, simply changed uniforms. Canada's turn to harm reduction after 2016 supervised injection sites, naloxone distribution, safe supply trials, marked the first large-scale attempt to step outside the binary of pure and crime. Yet, even there, compassion arrived through public-private partnerships. State subcontracted empathy. Bureaucracy replaced moral panic, preserved the same function, control disguised as care. Compassion was still measured in quarterly reports. The lesson repeats across continents. Wherever prohibition collapses, management takes its place. The same institutions that criminalised addiction now monetise its treatment. Globalisation turned narcotics into a feedback economy, a circuit where every overdose, every awareness programme feeds another budget line. What began as a moral crusade matured into industrial strategy. The next section turns from policy to perception, how the imagery of addiction itself became a propaganda tool. From newsreels to Netflix, the addict's face was framed as warning, never as witness. The camera, like the law, defined who was human and who was headlined. So the next section traces that visual regime, the making of the addict as the spectacle. I have more to say that later in the book as well. Section 39, the illusion revealed. By the 2020s, the rhetoric of opioid crisis had itself become a brand. Documentaries, lawsuits and protests targeted the sacklers, yet the system that produced them remained untouched. Purdue Pharma's bankruptcy redistributed liability across subsidiaries. Executives retained their fortunes. The spectacle of justice replaced justice itself. As one activist from Prescription Addict Action told The Guardian in 2021, they gave us a settlement instead of a future. The opioid catastrophe thus completes the historical arc begun in section 25. What started with the industrial commodification of pleasure matured into the industrial commodification of pain. Prohibition and prescription became mirror images, each treating consciousness as property, each requiring obedience, each extracting profit from suffering. The crisis was never the aberration of a few corrupt companies. It was a logical outcome of a civilization that mistakes sedation for safety. If prohibition criminalised desire, the new medicine pathologised it. In both cases, the result was identical. Citizens trained to mistrust their own bodies. The challenge, as later chapters will argue, is to reclaim that trust, to rebuild healing as collective autonomy rather than commercial dependency. Till then, the bottle on the bedside table or the barley wine under my mum's sink remains the quietest instrument of control ever invented. Every empire eventually outlives its excuses. The global war on drugs, justified for a century as moral defence, has become a moral wound. Its victims number in the millions, improvised, stigmatised, displaced or dead. Yet its architects still speak of public safety. As Section 26 showed, Prohibition's language conceals its violence. As Section 37 revealed, the pharmaceutical regime inherits its logic. Both systems seek obedience, both not well-being. The time has come to end the experiment and rebuild policy from the ground of compassion. Next chapter turns from a critique to reconstruction. If addiction is a mirror of social fear, what might a culture of trust look like? The next section explores emerging models of collective recovery, from community clinics to psychedelic therapy, where healing is measured not by compliance, but by connection. So the issue was never simply whether the state punished addiction or treated it. The deeper pattern is that the same systems keep turning suffering into something to control, manage and profit from, even when they speak the language of compassion. So if punishment and treatment can both serve the same logic, what would real healing look like instead? In the next video we turn from a policy to perception and look to how the addict has turned into an image, a spectacle to be watched, judged and feared. Next up, Section 40, Restorative Justice, and that's the last section in this chapter, then we move on.